Welcome to the CFB Dynasty Podcast with hosts Matt Knowles, Brian McElfresh, and Doug Gravely.
Hey everybody, how you doing out there? It's time for a little bit earlier than normal CFB Dynasty Podcast. B-Mac, I know you are excited about today's show because you got some fun, exciting new things you've been working on for quite a while. Before we get into anything else, why don't you just tell people just in general what it is you're so freaking excited about?
Yeah, well, I look forward to the feedback, but we have player projections, so actual point projections that power the rankings this week. So we're going to kind of see how I feel about it. I've been working on it until like really late last night. We finally got the week 6 player rankings live, and really that was the delay, was getting that formula in there, making those adjustments. So we'll be showing it, going over it, and also going over a couple of the known weaknesses and all that stuff. But basically what we want to do is provide you guys with tools to help you put the odds in your favor when you're setting your lineups, when you're running DFS. Is going to be deeper, way deeper rankings than before, because that's what people were asking for on the Discord, YouTube comments, website comments. So we appreciate the feedback and want to do our best for you guys on that front. So the rankings are a lot deeper per position this week. You'll notice that search function is going to come in handy now that the page is getting kind of quite longer. And then we have the consistency tool launched as well that we'll talk about: quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and how and when to use that. We'll certainly be using that during the panic meter here today. So yeah, excited to launch it, excited to get the feedback, and excited to use it, set my own lineup this week, because it's getting that critical, a fourth of the season is done. Critical to win these games and position your team for the playoffs. And it's exciting, man. It's also a little nerve-wracking. I'm kind of middle tier in the home league right now, so it's disappointing.
Hey, but it's good though. It's good having the information. And we looked over the tool just a little bit before we went live. One of the things I always say about a tool is the tool is information, but you can never take away the things that a tool can't calculate. Things like, did a guy, we talked about Malik Sherrod from Fresno State, wasn't even expected to play, and he didn't start, and he got in for a little bit of the game. So that might make his numbers be off a little bit. You have to be able to judge that. You personally mentioned somebody like Nico Iamaleava that, might not even play a whole game because his team is so dominant. So it might put his overall stats for the week down. So that's, you have to be able to use a little bit of real world common sense that the numbers aren't going to be able to tell you. But the thing I really like about the tool and what the time you've put into it is that it just gives you so much deeper of information to be able to consider. And for people like us that want to be able to have that in-depth information out there, we know there's a lot of guys in our leagues that want that information. Now it's there, so that way you can consider it when you're making your decisions.
Yeah, 100%. And some of those things too that are going to kind of come into play as we get deeper into conference play is just the projections will get more improved as it gets more information, more data gets powered into it every week. So it's exciting. It's fun. Something people have been asking for. So I'm excited for the feedback. And it's weird. Honestly, it's a little weird. It's definitely different than how I would rank them big time.
So real quick, before we continue, last week on this show, we talked about the impending Hurricane Helene that was about to actually make landfall and how it was not going to affect us in the way that a hurricane you normally expect it to. There were some factors that actually saved us in a sense because of the front that was in the middle of the U.S. that pulled a lot of the stuff that's normally on the dirty east side north. We had no clue when we filmed this podcast the devastation that was going to happen through Georgia and South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee. So we just want to make sure that we let you guys know we recognize that. And, we put some best wishes out there. The areas that got devastated. I was actually at a comic convention a year ago to the day from when it hit Asheville. And I can tell you those mountain roads in Nashville, some of the scariest roads I'd ever driven on in my life. And I remember commenting to people that I was like having anxiety attacks because of those mountain roads. So seeing those mountain roads washed away and seeing the way, I mean, there was like the Airbnb we stayed in, the small town near there said, oh, we expected 19 feet above normal for the river, and they got 27 feet above normal. And I'm like, I can't even fathom having water 27 feet higher than it was. So while we make a big deal about fantasy football, and while we have a lot of fun with this, we do know that there are other bigger, more important things happening in the world. That being said, we know that even when there are bigger, more important things happening in the world, you need a distraction like this to get through your day. Isn't that right, B-Mac?
Yeah, man. And quick story. So Mike Davis, while he and I were going back and forth on trade talks, him and his family, and they live in Georgia, they were vacationing up in Nashville, and they got stuck. And at one point I was talking to him. He was like, we're going to be here for days. We've got 1 day of food left. And they didn't know what was going to happen. They ended up being one of the fortunate ones to be able to get out and get back home. But it's quite an adventure for a family vacation. And it's a place I love too. Like, we've been up in the Boone area, and that's right where App State is. And me and the kids and wife got to run around on the field and mess around. And that's when I rebranded my home league team to App State. But anyways, sucks, man. Definitely prayers for those guys, and gonna have to spend a lot of time rebuilding there. And I don't know what the campus looks like. I haven't seen it, but I heard it got wrecked at App State.
I would not doubt that at all. Hey, and while you're saying this, over in our chat, Mike Davis, who you're speaking about, actually has thrown a couple comments up here. He said heartbreaking. He could vouch for fantasy football being a useful distraction during that week. So that's actually, I'm glad to hear that from the peanut gallery, in the sense that, what we're saying here is actually truth.
Well, we couldn't have made that. We could have made it more exciting with the trade there. But I just wasn't able to make it happen. We'll see what happens. I'm in deep trade talks with Danny right now for
deep trade talks with Danny. So we know if Brian is in deep trade talks with Danny Tucker, there's going to be is the over under going to be 5 total draft picks that are going to get traded in this trade? Over under 5 draft picks. So with man, I just lost. So real quick, the reason why we're doing this early, I've actually got travel plans. I got to get out. I've got this Spookalif convention that I'm going to. I literally, as soon as this podcast is done, I'm getting in the car to head down there just to set up. So if you guys are like, man, why are you guys doing this so early this morning, man? This is why. So it's on me that we're had to do this early. So, all right. Good, so man. We are going to get down to our panic meter. Panic meter is going to be a little different than last week, but you know what? BMAC, hit the drop, and then we'll explain it.
Emergency. Please remain calm.
All right, so this week, panic meter, instead of going through everybody we went through last week, we have a few names, a couple of new names, and then we have a couple of things things we just did not see coming. Things that happened in college football last week that were massive, that we just did not see coming, that we're going to include in this as well. So right off the bat, we actually had somebody call this out on the Discord chat, which is funny because he's the number one person for us to talk about this week, is Arondé Gadsden II. Syracuse tight end, widely considered the number one tight end in the game. Statistically, not even close to being the number one tight end in the game. His last 2 weeks, he had 2.2 and 0.9 points. So that's a pathetic stat line. Again, because tight ends are so thin, you can't go do anything with that. You just don't start him right now, maybe.
With as much success as they've had passing the ball too. Yeah. You would expect more. It's really weird, but that's just kind of how it's shaken out so far. This week, Syracuse on the road at UNLV, he's projected 9.17 points, but you drafted him as tight end 1. And that's kind of what you expected. While Harold Fannin is projected, based on his year-to-date average, and they're playing at Akron, which should be a beatdown, He's projected 27.
And that doesn't surprise me at all. We'll talk about both UNLV and Harold Fanist in a little bit. So the panic meter on Gadsden, I've got him as a 4 right now, and here's why. Most likely, you don't have Gadsden and Fannin on the same roster. If you do, what's going on with your league? Most likely, because tight ends are so down this year, you probably don't have another guy that you're going to feel more confident about starting over Gadsden. But I would still put the panic meter at a 4 because that's not the kind of numbers you want to see out of somebody that should be getting a lion's share of targets in that offense. What do you think there, B-Mac?
That's a tough one because we know he's produced in the past. We know he's really good talent. So I think he's a trade 4 target for me. I like that he's, let's see, his average so far is 11.9 fantasy points per game, which would put him in the top 5. So it's not like he's doing terrible. He's just doing terrible against our expectations.
Yeah.
So the potential is there. I would go and get him. I would test it out, see kind of the feelings of the Gadsden owner and make a play for it, because that passing offense has done way better than expected. If he gets more involved, it's, huge potential there.
All right, so we're actually going to skip the next one. We're going to come back to it because we're going to talk about that game a little bit later. So Damian Martinez, he's somebody that you wanted to add onto this list this week, B-Mac. Let everybody know why you wanted to add Martinez on there and what your panic meter rating is for him.
Yeah, let's take a look. So this would be how you can use the consistency tool here. So if you're looking on YouTube, you can see the little search function. It's just above the table where you can search anyone. And this certainly comes in handy because normally we've got like 40 to 50 running backs ranked. And this week we've got somewhere over 150, I don't know, ish. And this running back consistency tool will be updated weekly with the top 100 running backs based on total fantasy points on the season. So we have this launched for quarterbacks, for wide receivers, and Damian Martinez does make the top 100. So that part is good. He's sitting there at 12.3 fantasy points per game. They've had one bye week, week 3. So far on the season, he went RB 192, RB 55, RB 9 when he had, I think, 3 touchdowns, and then RB 118. The biggest deal to me is he doesn't pass the eye test against the running backs on the roster. Like Lyle, I know he's a speedster and he's a freshman. He just looks like the best running back on the roster, where Martinez is a bigger back. Yeah, maybe he's going to get those goal line touches. But if touchdowns are inconsistent and he's not getting a good volume of touches, he's just not startable. So find that fan in your league and get rid of him. Panic meter for me is 9.9.
So I don't know if I would go at 9.9 on Martinez, but I absolutely understand that because to me, you just got to go and look back a couple weeks ago. 3 carries for 3 yards for the whole game is ridiculous in that Miami offense. Someone like Damian Martinez should not be getting 3 carries for 3 yards based on the expectations and the knowledge that we have of him. Again, maybe the Miami offense just isn't the right fit for him. Maybe he's going to show up when you get deeper into conference play. But right now, Martinez is not startable unless you have no other options on your team. So I would say maybe a 9.6. I don't think I would go as far as 9.9. But I totally understand why Damian Martinez is on here. Next one you wanted to make sure we called out, and this is also showing a way that you need to be careful with the tool, is Malik Sherrod from Fresno State. They're starting running back. 2 weeks ago, he was a game time, didn't play. This past week, we all thought he wasn't going to play, and then all of a sudden, he started getting carries in the game. He didn't start, and then he got in the game and got some carries. So B-Mac, take a look at his numbers on the sheet. As you can see, not really good when you got a bunch of reds on there. I mean, we all know that. So tell people how to interpret the numbers we have up here on the new tool.
Yeah, so I will add currently a weak spot here. If you see a crazy red number that's out of character, is probably from a bye week. But I know Fresno State hasn't had 3 bye weeks, so he's got three red numbers. But like you said, the injury didn't start last week, so that makes sense. And then, but still, his best 2 games are week 2 RB32, week 3 RB38. He was definitely drafted higher in most leagues, and from the coaching staff and everything that we saw and have seen in the data going into this season is you expect Sherrod to be like super high volume in terms of touches, and it just hasn't played out for him so far this season. So would you consider him a hold if you have him? I assume so. And then would you trade for him? Is this one of those opportunities where it's like, all right, he hasn't produced and we're 5 weeks in, maybe the owner's starting to panic or sour on Sherrod because he's had poor production so far? Maybe you want to get him for a playoff run. What do you think?
See, I think it's a buy low. I think if somebody's offering him low, I would get him. I don't know if I would be giving up capital, higher capital than that on a hope. I think that Malik Sherrod and Jalen Moss in that same offense, the 2 guys coming into the year that you thought were going to be the guys, are the guys that are underproducing in that offense. Mm-hmm. You've got 2 receivers producing better. I think that the point here is that there's just something about the offense this year that's running differently than we expected coming in. So I don't know. I mean, you know that I'm a Fresno State fan in fantasy, and I don't know if I would go out and get Sherrod unless I was able to get a really good deal for him.
Yeah, so this is part of what the tool's good for, though, or you can go and find people that have underperformed, based on their name, based on the offense, based on injuries, whatever. And that's one that stood out to me.
All right, so the next one we're going to talk about, we got a bunch of people to talk about that came out of one single game last week in fantasy football. We actually called the game out, which was Sam Houston State versus Texas State. You look at that game and you're like, 40-39 game. This must have been a shootout. Not so fast, my friend. The stats in this game tell a much, much, much bigger story for fantasy than you would think in a 40-39 game. First thing we're going to look at, if you have got anybody in the Sam Houston State offense, do not start them. You can get rid of them because there is not anybody that is really startable in that offense. And here's why. You could say, well, what about their quarterback? So in a 40-39 game, here's their quarterback stats from last game. And this is why you should have pause about anything else. Quarterback, Hunter Watson, 10 of 19 passing for 95 yards in a 40-39 game. You're like, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. The dude had 27 carries. He had 27 carries for 105 yards and 2 touchdowns rushing. So you're talking about the quarterback had 46 plays where he was the main guy on that play.
So you're talking about skill position here. Like, obviously he didn't pass well, but he would be a good start in fantasy from his carries. But running back and wide receivers, you're saying.
Well, but here's the thing, though. I would still avoid him because that quarterback line total, he only had 200 yards combined, rushing and passing, and 2 touchdowns. So even though he had a great stat line rushing, I wouldn't start Hunter Watson because you probably are going to have 30 or 40 more quarterbacks out there that are going to be doing a lot more with the ball. They had nearly 300 yards rushing as a team, 95 yards passing. That's why people like Noah Smith are only getting 2, 3, 4 targets in a game, because this offense has converted to a run-heavy offense this year. Yep. So what we thought we were going to get into Sam Houston State, we thought we were going to get a heavier passing offense has consistently shown it's going to be run-heavy, but also run-heavy with carries split up amongst a lot of players and their quarterback. So I would not touch anybody on there because I think there's much better quarterbacks out there. But the other side of that game is Ishmael Mahdi. Ishmael Mahdi was on the field for Texas State. BMAC, we talked during this game. Tell people what your thoughts were about Mahdi right now in that Texas State offense.
So week 1 is the confusing week because it's kind of like we got what we expected. He had like 25-ish carries, a bunch of yards, and overall, just kind of what we expected is like, all right, he'll get his touchdowns when he gets that many touches. But since then, he just hasn't. They've kind of converted to a pass first offense. With the new quarterback, Jordan McLeod, coming over, and McLeod's been good. You'll see him in our top 5 projected this week based on all the data. But Mahdi just hasn't been it. He's 88 or RB 88 in the country, and you probably drafted him as an RB1 starter for your team. So it's a tough one for me. It's kind of like here, I'll give you a question. Early show question, Matt. So this week in my flex for the home league, I'm not playing against you. So I'm playing who do I have this week? Gordy Miller. So I got Mahdi. They're playing at Tulane. Texas State's supposed to score 38 points this week, but Mahdi, as a percentage of the offense, just hasn't had much fantasy production. Or I've got Trevor Etienne home against Georgia, or LaQuint Allen at UNLV. Which one of those three would you put in the flex?
Man, I know it's difficult to say. I think Allen might be one, but I feel like
they're all super close in the projections this week.
Yeah, honestly, with those 3 guys, I would probably pick Mahdi. Not that I would want him to be in my lineup, because I do have him in other leagues, but I'm pretty sure he's out of the lineup right now. But I feel like if that's the 3 options you have, because here's the thing, Mahdi's not getting 0 points. It's not like he's getting nothing in a game. He just isn't getting that person that was drafted in probably one of the first 3 rounds in your draft kind of stats. But I feel like his floor is probably higher than the other guys.
Yeah, ETN, though, he's been getting the lion's share of the carries at Georgia, and they're coming off a loss. So they're probably going to be playing angry against Auburn, who's kind of falling apart. So that one is tough for me. Really tough. So Mahdi plays tonight, so I've got to make that choice. I think you're right, though. Like, Mahdi's the one, if any of them are going to go for 180 and 3 touchdowns, Mahdi would be that guy.
Yeah.
But it's a boring start. All right, well, I'm going to be playing that then, and I'm going to be watching Mahdi tonight as soon as I get home from coaching kids soccer. Shout out to Jordan Harden, who found us on Google. A comment up there, first year playing college fantasy. I'm 4-1. You guys are the best. If we were the best, you'd be 5-0, I feel like. So sorry for that loss. Had no clue who Ashton Genty was. Drafted him third overall. Yeah, he's number 1 consistency. He's number 1 everything. Genty is freaking incredible yet again. But let's answer this question here. This is right along the lines of Panic Meter. He was someone we talked about pre-show too. So Fegan, let's pull him up on the consistency meter here, or consistency chart. It's all red. So you drafted him probably as an RB3, maybe an RB2. And historically, Brett Bielema, with his offensive line production, or his offensive line, built for running the ball back in his Wisconsin days. Same to Illinois as you get into to this season. It's been a little weird where the top running back, who was 6'3", 200 plus pounds, and pretty fast, like good in that offense, good enough. The schedule's been to where you would expect to have seen a couple touchdown game out of him by now. But his best output is week 1 as RB 62, and really he's only got worse. RB 99 week 2, RB 96, then 150, then 113 last week. So he's not a trade for target to me. He's a prove it to me, and I'm going to put him on the bench. I don't know that I'm going to cut him yet because that potential is there. Offensive line is one of those weird things where it just takes the right group to where they start to gel, and then the offense can start to take off. But man, it's that's a tough one. Do you disagree?
So I would say here, I think for Jordan, is if you're new to fantasy football in college, I think that a couple of the big factors here are, is this a seasonal full redraft league? Is this a dynasty? Is there any kind of holdovers? Is it, college to pro? I would think it's probably going to be a seasonal redraft. It all matters what you could get in place of him. It all matters who was out there on the waiver wire. You don't want to just get rid of him just because he's frustrating you. Like BMAC just brought up a good thing. He just literally considered starting Trevor Etienne. Trevor Etienne, his son, literally, Brian, how old is your son? 5, 4?
7.
His son is 7. And his son had to burn his Florida Trevor Etienne jersey after he went to Georgia. But BMAC is still considering starting him because that's the best option potentially that he has. So look at who else is out there in your league. If you've got a better option that's out there on the waiver wire, then maybe you do, because those numbers don't look good for Fegan.
Yeah, and here's the most frustrating part is that the schedule hasn't been too difficult. They've won 4 games. So they've been successful with him, having these outputs, and they've played Eastern Illinois. They played Kansas. They played Central Michigan. And against Central Michigan, he finished RB 96. And then they won on the road at Nebraska. They put up 31 points, and Fegan didn't have a great game. But then, of course, at Penn State is going to be a tough one for everyone except for Harold Fannin. So that one is not surprising. But, yeah, I don't like it. Plus, you got games coming up against – so this week against Purdue is a wait-and-see game. I wouldn't be starting him this week. But then it's Michigan. Then it's at Oregon. Those are unstartable games for Fegan.
So in the comments, I love it. I love it when people in the comments give each other some trash. So Jordan Harden had said, hey, I had no clue who Ashton Genty was, drafted him 3rd overall. He's killing it. Todd Skids jumps in. If Genty went 3rd in your league, that's a league I want to join. That's actually pretty funny, because I mean, there were 3 guys out there that were consensus the top 3, and I think if a league had Genty go 3rd, the reason why is because he's a Boise State running back, not Oklahoma State and not North Carolina, which were the consensus top 3 guys that were out there. We'll talk about Genty a little bit more in the show. You know that I have no problem talking about Genty because he's always been a guy he's a guy that'll probably go to the Hall of Fame on my college pro team because he's not going anywhere ever.
We still have to figure out how to display that on the website for the home league. But
yeah.
Quick answer on this one, Matt, because we got to move along here.
Yes.
Scorpio, should I trade Tyreek for Diggs and Goddard?
If this is a seasonal redraft league, I would probably do that, because the Dolphin offense is, oh my gosh. The Dolphin offense is so bad right now. And it's so bad right now. And if somebody wants to give you those 2 guys in a seasonal redraft league for Tyreek, I would probably take it. If it's a league with any kind of holdovers, any kind of dynasty, I would rethink that. But if it's a seasonal league, yeah, I think you've got to, because the Dolphin offense has got a long way to go to get themselves back under control. 4th quarterback in 3 weeks. The play calling is some of the worst play calling, like historically bad right now. So yeah.
Therapy session here for you, Matt.
It was, man. We talked Trevor Etienne for you. So bringing up the Dolphins, I deserve that. I get it.
All right. So let's move this one along here. So
all right. So we had 2 quick things. There were things that happened last week that nobody could see coming. First, we're going to go back to that UNLV Fresno State game. If you're out there and you thought that UNLV, behind a new quarterback, Haj Malik Williams, after UNLV being the talk of the college football world last week because their quarterback in an undefeated team leaves over an NIL dispute, and they lose one of their top 2 running backs the next day, you're like, Fresno State's going to smash these guys. I remember saying out loud that Fresno State was going to crush these guys when that game started. Little did I know that Haj Malik Williams and UNLV were going to go out there and crush Fresno State 59-14. UNLV, are they trying to make a case to get that 12th playoff spot, BMAC? What do you think? That's a pretty big statement.
They've got an opportunity, and we had Ricky White on the panic meter last week, and I said this is a trade for Target. go get him. I said I was going to try and go get him. I did try. I failed. Hopefully some of you were successful because he finished as wide receiver 5 last week. And that's a really, really good projection, I think, for how things are going to go with the new quarterback starting at UNLV.
All right. And then the other thing was, most people should have. If you didn't, shame on you. Pay attention. Watch that Alabama-Georgia game. Nobody expected Alabama to go up 28-0 early on Georgia. Everybody was like, this is unbelievable. And then for Georgia to storm back and take the lead 34-33, only to lose the lead in the game 13 seconds later to freshman sensation Ryan Williams. What an insane game. BMAC, as an SEC fan, what were your thoughts watching that insanity take place in that game?
It was incredible. So the kids had me build them a fire in the fire pit. So they ended up going inside after making some s'mores, and it was just a little glass and watching the game out back, and it was incredible times. What a game. Like, I couldn't take my eyes off of it. And Ryan Williams is a super freaky talent. Him and Jeremiah Smith are absolutely incredible as freshmen. And Milroe, 30-second response on this. I saw PFF put out a mock draft for anybody in Devy leagues. Milroe was projected after Travis Hunter, number 2 overall, to the Dolphins. What do you think?
I don't know what I think that people need to take some pause about Alabama quarterbacks. People made a big deal about Alabama and their quarterbacking. Look at where Alabama quarterbacks are right now in the NFL. They're not faring too well.
Tua?
I think that, well, Tua, yeah, but Tua also has admittedly taken advantage of weaker teams and has had a tough time against stronger teams. But Alabama quarterbacks, I think one of the problems that they have in the league is that they've got so much offensive talent around them in Alabama. They might have more offensive talent around them in Alabama than the team they go to in the pros. Look at Mac Jones. Mac Jones, absolute disaster in the pros because Alabama probably had more offensive talent than New England.
A different staff, though, to me. Like, I think some people are just special at coaching, and DeBoer just might be that guy. In fantasy football, one of the things that we follow heavily in the off season as we're preparing our rankings for the summertime for draft season is the coach. Where do the coaching staffs go? How have they done in the past? And Kalen DeBoer, what he did with Penix and got Penix drafted really high, and we'll see how he does in the NFL. But
Penix and 3 wide receivers all drafted high too.
If Milroe has that decision making, which it looks like it's much improved from last year, like you can't deny that. Paired with his power and his speed and quickness, could be absolutely incredible version of a Lamar Jackson kind of.
Yeah, I was going to say I compare the way he plays to Lamar Jackson.
Built stronger, and I wouldn't say faster, but stronger.
All right, so real quick, we got a comment over here in the chat that we're going to jump over to first half fantasy thoughts. So Josh Reed says, I was first, and I don't know why I went with Tet McMillan first. And then he gives an excuse. He says, it was a panic pick. I had a meeting starting. So is that a reasonable excuse to not draft Genty first? I say, no, get out of here with that crap. What do you think, B-Mac?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely against the grain. Tet McMillan has been solid, though. Genty, though, is potential league winner for you if you of any first round pick. Genty is the guy. Tet McMillan has not been a bad one, though.
All right, so we're going to look at some of our quick fantasy first half thoughts. We are going to probably abridge some of our topics today. I know we got a couple of things that we're running up against, but fantasy first half thoughts. Fantasy Heisman at this point in the season, hands down, I don't think there's anybody that even comes close to Ashton Genty right now. The kind of stats he's put up have been ridiculous. They've been video game numbers, and he's done it against some teams. I mean, yeah, he did it against Georgia Southern, but when you do it against Oregon, when you do the things that he did against Washington State, and he didn't just put up numbers. You need to go online. If you did not watch that game, go look for the highlights and look at what he did on those touchdown runs. None of them were like the offensive line opened up a hole and he goes untouched. There's 5-6 broken tackles in a run that's 50 yards. There's him being wrapped up at the 5-yard line and diving into the end zone to get a score. The kind of things he's doing are just ridiculous. The stats he is averaging right now 41.85 points per game, which is higher than any other person at any position, including quarterback, including Milroe, including John Mateer. That is ridiculous. We have never seen numbers like this coming out of a non-quarterback position. So if he can keep it up, I think he's got it shooting. What do you think, B-Mac?
Yeah, 100%. And he's up there in the Heisman odds now, and he should be. Boise State, they'll be competing for sure with UNLV for that group of 5 spot in the playoff. But yeah, Genty, easy fantasy Heisman this far into the season.
And so in our home league, it's a college to pro league. So our drafts go completely different than a normal seasonal draft would go. There were 6 freshmen, I think, drafted in a row in the first round, and 2 of them were Ryan Williams and Jeremiah Smith. Freshman wide receivers right now, those 2 true freshmen are both in the top 9 overall in wide receiver performance. Both are averaging just at 21 points per game. That is unbelievable. I would personally say that in my book, that Genty, Ryan Williams, Jeremiah Smith are 3 of the top 4 overall players that you want to have on your team. The other one being Travis Hunter. That's my book. What do you think, B-Mac?
Yeah, man, 100%. Those 2, as we look at Devy rankings again, those will be in the top 3. They're just the best. Period.
And every week they do something just as insane. The kind of catches coming out of Ryan Williams and Jeremiah Smith are the equivalent of the insanity coming out of Ashton Genty on the ground. Yep. Now, 2 other guys, if you look statistically, Caleb Johnson, Dylan Sampson, both have settled into their starting roles. Both are now in the top 4 overall as far as running backs go. Caleb Johnson is a guy that I personally gave up on, which now I feel like a complete fool for doing that. But it was, like we said last week, it was keep Caleb Johnson or Dylan Sampson. I kept Sampson. You couldn't really go wrong with either one. But B-Mac, what do you think about these 2 guys that weren't anywhere near the top last year that are now both in the top 4?
Yeah, Caleb Johnson's just an interesting bounce back story where, his consistency where he's been 17, 8, 8, 1 so far. And Iowa's got a tough matchup. We'll see how he plays this week. But 32 fantasy points per game, along with RJ Harvey, who's been able to hold off Penny Boone, who went for 1,300 yards at Toledo a year ago. So, man, those are 2 great performers so far. And while we had Harvey pretty high, not high enough, obviously, he's RB2 right now. We had him as high as RB3 or 4 before Penny Boone came over, and that gave us some pause, along with KJ Jefferson, who we thought would run the ball a bit more. And Harvey's just still a beast, just loads and loads of touchdowns, like as many as Genty has. Harvey's not too far off in touchdowns. Caleb Johnson's been great too.
So then another name to call out, fantasy first half thoughts, John Mateer. This week, he just barely fell out of that number 1 QB spot because Boise State was able to kind of keep him in check. But you couple that with Milroe's performance, who just barely jumped into the number 1 spot. John Mateer, not somebody that anybody expected to be up there at the top of the list. So kudos to him in that Washington State offense for being a quarterback that he's a must-have on your team. And then last but not least, we already brought him up, Harold Fannin from Bowling Green, far and away the top tight end. If you had him as a wide receiver, you would be starting him as a wide receiver over all the other guys you have. And if you have him as a tight end, oh my goodness, this dude is averaging in the last 3 weeks for a tight end. He is averaging 13 targets a game. Averaging 13 targets a game for a tight end over 3 weeks is insane. We talk about consistency. We talk about targets. Those are the kind of numbers you want. And it's not like he's getting 2 receptions on 13 targets. The guy's averaging over 24 points a game. That's who you want on your squad.
100%. It's been absolute ridiculous. Must start every week, and a huge advantage if you have him over everyone else in your league. Yeah, it's a 10 point per game average there.
All right.
Advantage.
So BMAC, I think we're going to do something a little bit different this week than we normally do. How about this week we actually skip the segment where we actually go through and look at the actual rankings all the way through, because we've been looking at the tool already. We've been looking at the tool a bunch. People have seen the tool. They've seen, the screenshots of where we're at. They know the tool is there. If they're a subscriber, they can go use it. That way we can get to our news and notes. We can get to the other things that we have on the list before we have to jump out of here at 10:30. What do you think about that?
I'll go over this real quick because we mostly have been looking at the consistency tool. So the projections here, we said it at the top of the show, but I do just want to reiterate, as I'm sharing on the screen here, the projections they look way different than when I manually built them out. So what it is, so you see the last column to the right is the actual projection for how many fantasy points they're going to get. This is a basic, out of the box, unadjusted Fantrax system. The projections look really low to me because our home league has some bonuses and different things there. So quarterbacks are a little bit more valuable in our home league. So it really freaked me out last night at like 11:30 when I was wrapping this up. It's like, oh my gosh, these look so low. But then I looked at the fantasy points per game, and it's pretty consistent with there's only a few that are in the 30s right now. So what this factors in and why it's a good tool and something that I'm going to be using for DFS, something that I'm going to be using to help set my lineup as a tool, along with the consistency tool. Of course, you've got that projected points for, you've got the projected points against. The fantasy projection takes that into consideration along with the past games. So as the season goes, the projections will get better and better, or more accurate, smarter and smarter, however you want to say it. But it factors in essentially what percentage of the offense is Jalen Milroe. So it's not just, passing yards, etc. But overall, in terms of like pure usage, what percentage of the offense is Milroe? And that's how we come to this projection based on how many points they're going to score this week. 32.37 Milroe is the number one start this week. It makes sense to me. I'm absolutely starting him. I apologize for, starting Jackson Dart last week over Milroe. I thought, Dart going against Kentucky, Milroe going against Georgia felt like the right move, and I was wrong. Milroe is an every week start, no matter what, as long as he's healthy, of course. But these rankings, Matt, look a lot different than before.
Well,
so what do you think about the top 10 here in quarterbacks?
Well, I think that the thing also to keep in mind is this is one of the really, really heavy bye week. 6, 7, 8 are always insane when it comes to buys. I actually had to one of my leagues, I actually had to trade to get a quarterback because I had every other quarterback was on a bye. Every quarterback was on a bye. So I think that that's part of the reason why it looks a little bit different. I think that the quarterbacks are solid. I think that they're solid. I know that there's one that we'll get into a little bit later when we get to our brisket lock. But I think that, the numbers don't really lie. I think that there's a bunch of great guys up there. I want to see how App State does this week and see if their quarterback's able to have a little bit of motivation, kind of like when New Orleans came back after everything that happened with Katrina and helped to galvanize that community. Let's see if App State's able to do the same thing there.
Now, the weakness here is people that were hurt or played partial games. Like Nico Imaliava, I want to call out. He's like way down the list here. He's projected to score 13 or something like that. Well, he's not as much as Tennessee has scored, as much as he has kind of sat the bench in the second half, that kind of thing. He hasn't so far been a high level, like as a percentage of that offense in fantasy production. It hasn't been there yet. So as that changes, the projections will change, but and it's going to become more balanced as you get into conference play and whatnot. Let's take a quick look. So you see 80 quarterbacks deep there, running backs. Man, it is a bit different. As you look at Marquez Cooper, who's been mostly not disappointing. He's averaging 17.8 fantasy points per game, but he hasn't had a great game yet. He's been pretty consistent, and they're projected to score 26, but because he's such a high scorer as a percentage of that offense, he's the third best start of the week this week, behind Harvey and Genty, who you would expect to be up there. Plenty of others. Again, use the search function. Of course, you can download or whatever if you want to. But we have now 126 running backs ranked at wide receiver. We have 223. So this is more useful now for DFS. It's a legit DFS tool with the projection. If in the future we're able to pull in FanDuel, DraftKings prices, then we could have a formula to produce the legit who's the best value, how many points per dollar are you going to get, and that's going to be something that'll be fantastic. I just need more time on this. But anyways, 70 plus tight ends, kickers there. You guys have at it and let me know your feedback.
And remember, that's a function that's only going to be available to subscribers. So if you're not subscribed to the CFBDynasty.com website, you need to go up there and become a subscriber. Then you'll have the access to all of these different functions. Okay, real quick, because I know we're running out of time, I'm going to hit a couple of quick comments, and we'll try to run through the rest of the stuff we have. So in our home league chat, had to make sure that we called this one out because it's a great comment. William Dong said, "I'm impressed by the way that Uncle Joe went from trying to draft other people's players as recently as 4 years ago to being the only person that's undefeated and sitting atop our standings. What are the rest of us doing?" So, William Dong, let's be factually correct. We're gonna do a fact check here. Joe tries to draft other people's players every year. It's not 4 years ago; it's every year. But now there's not really a whole lot of other comments to make on that one. So he did have another quick question though in the YouTube chat. Do you guys think future true freshmen will have performances like Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams because the 6th to 9th year players are running out of eligibility, or are they just that elite? I think that one, they're just that elite in my book.
Yep.
I don't really think that the 6th to 9th year guys are taking up a lot of room from those true freshmen. I think that if you're somebody that's going to be a cream of the crop player, I mean, you're talking Alabama, you're talking Ohio State, you're talking those teams that are always going to have top level talent have got these true freshmen, 17 years old, doing that kind of stuff. I think you're always going to have guys that are going to jump in and are going to jump to the top of the list like that. So I don't think that that's something you're going to see become more or less. That you're always going to see these younger guys. I think the transfer portal is what's going to impact that a lot more than the guys with 6 to 9 years of eligibility. I think the transfer portal, guys from smaller schools being able to convert over to higher level schools is what you're going to see impact those true freshman performances a little more.
Yep, 100%. They're just freaking elite.
All right, so you want to do news and notes real quick, then we'll hit brisket lock?
Yeah, sounds good. Let's go.
News and notes around college football.
All right, some quick news and notes around college football. DJ Ugalele for Florida State has a hand injury, definitely out this week. His overall status going forward is unknown. Brock Glenn is going to be the starter. We know a lot of FSU fans, they want that to be the case. They don't really care if it's Brock Glenn or not. They just don't want it to be DJU.
Real quick, I got Sean in the chat. It was a text message. Sean and Danny, FSU fans in the home league. I was like, oh, look, DJU got hurt just in time so that he can redshirt and come back next year for you guys. Sean was furious for a minute, but then they realized, oh no, he's played 5 games, so they're safe.
that was actually a pretty funny exchange. There was a little bit of fire going on. Don't you dare say he's coming back to our squad. Desmond Reed, running back Pitt, expected to return this week after not playing in week 4. Max Brown, quarterback Charlotte, good to be back as the starter after being out for the previous 3 weeks. Ethan Garbers, quarterback UCLA, still not a full go at practice, so his status for this weekend is in question. Harrison Whaley for running back for Wyoming, targeted as a week 9 return. That was a huge preseason injury right there. Connor Weigman, quarterback Texas A&M, good to go for this weekend versus Missouri after being out the last 2 games. But keep an eye on this as they are saying it's the dreaded game time decision. Peyton Thorne, quarterback Auburn, tabbed as the starter for now. Jamal Pritchett, wide receiver South Alabama, he's in concussion protocol. If he's in your lineup, keep an eye on the situation because he's the guy that if he's there, he's probably going to get a ton of targets. He's going to be useful to you. But if he's not starting, that's going to screw you if you have him in your starting lineup. Torrey Horton, wide receiver for Colorado State, expected to be available versus Oregon State. And the last but not least, Eugene Wilson, wide receiver Florida, questionable for Saturday. BMAC, what do you think about this? There was talk that Eugene Wilson might be out for the rest of the season, might make a business decision to be gone, but he might still be back. What is your thoughts there?
It would not surprise me whatsoever. I think it's going to be a bad end of the season. And I think this week could be the undoing of Napier if Florida just gets run all over in the swamp this week. All
right, so that is the news and notes here at CFB Dynasty.
I got one positive.
Oh, you got one?
You got all these.
I'm going to pause it. What's your positive one?
We had a top 10 fantasy wide receiver potential before he got hurt return last week, Colin Lacey. If he's available in your leagues, I'd go for him. So already 5 catches, 71 yards, and a carry. So he's going to get his touches in that Louisville offense. See if he's available. Go pick him up.
Hey, you know what else, though? That's another Jacorian Clark. Thought he was going to be medically retired. Actually got back in the game and got some catches last week. So there's another one that a guy you think is gone. He might be back.
There you go. A couple positive ones.
All right, so we're CFB Dynasty. This is where we help you to take your college fantasy experience to the next level. All right, so let's go to brisket locks. So brisket lock, let you hit the drop, and then we'll explain to you what brisket lock is.
No time to explain what it is. Let's go for it. My brisket lock this week is going to be a team or a player that I think is going to be able to carry his team to a home upset victory, potentially, if the defense can do what they've done in the past. Darius Taylor, Minnesota, hosting USC, who's been better, surprisingly better defensively, but this is a tough one. This is going to be a really, I think, high volume game in terms of touches for Darius Taylor. He's a start for me. They're projected to lose by 8.5 and score 21, but it's going to be a tough one for USC on the road.
All right, so I picked my brisket lock before I even saw the rankings. So my guy is actually at 9 in the rankings, but I still think he's going to do better than this. Alonzo Barnett from James Madison. Last 2 weeks, 668 yards, 10 touchdowns, no interceptions. He also had 158 yards rushing and 3 TDs. He's the quarterback that led them to the dismantling of UNC. He's got a very favorable schedule. He could end up being a top 5 quarterback, top 3 quarterback the rest of the way fantasy-wise. So if you have a chance to go pick him up, you want to go do that. And real quick, we can't let people go without telling about it. Probably our worst brisket lock performance of the year last week. We both said Ishmael Mahdi. He had his worst game of the season, 6.7 points and only 1 target. Also said look up LeJontay Wester, 3 catches for 34 yards, 1 TD. Not brisket lock worthy. So our brisket analysis last week, BMAC and Matt, we both get a plate of brisket. But before eating any, we have to go straight to the garbage can and throw it in the trash because that's what our picks were last week. We got to do better this week.
It was one of those overcooked briskets that shreds instead of slices. Classic.
Well, I know how upset you get when the brisket doesn't cook exactly right, man. I've seen that look on your face. All right, so we're not going to be able to get to looking at the home league and the open league and the Masters League this week just because we're running out of time here. But BMAC, how are you feeling about your performances there? I know I'm on a few game win streak. I'm in the top 4 in the Masters League. Makes me happy because I was in the bottom half. How are you feeling about your performances there in the other leagues?
Just middling right now. I've got to tighten up, but for me, that's it. That's a wrap. I do have to jump to the next thing, but I definitely look forward to the feedback on all the tools and all that stuff. Good luck this week. Football tonight.
That's right. Todd, sorry we couldn't get to your question. BMAC, you want to try and get Todd's question is answered in the Discord, so that way he knows we got him. And not all right. So good stuff. All right, everybody. On behalf of Brian McElfresh, my name is Matt Knowles. We will see you next time on the CFB Dynasty Podcast. See ya.
Thank you for listening to the CFB Dynasty Podcast. Help us out by subscribing on YouTube and reviewing us on your podcast network.